Lovely to see you all. So we're gonna, as I said, we're gonna have a little chat about growth, fixed versus growth mindset. Really, really relevant in the context of change, I think. I'm going to start by telling you a recent story where I've come up against this. Is even as a coach, kind of oscillating between fixed and growth mindset, and I will explain what these concepts are if you've not come across them before, but it's a trap that we can continue to fall into even when we're aware of it. So I've been working for a coach for a very, very long time on all sorts of mindset shifts, supporting my well-being and my productivity, and making sure that I have a far more kind of holistic view of my life, my identity and my purpose. But it's only recently that I got a business mentor. And that's far more on mentorship around kind of building a business, and kind of far more around the practical elements of kind of building a business. So we're now at the stage where we're sort of looking at scaling up, and we need a bit more structure and systems in place to allow for that. And one of the first things that we identified with my business mentor is this kind of like this block that I had around financial planning and tracking. And there's, as a project manager as well, there are no systems in place for this, which is quite interesting. And when I delved into it, there were a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of mindset blocks around this area. And that's because compared to everything else in my business, maths is not my thing, right? It's never been my thing. So I have this belief in my head, I'm not good at maths. And so as I've been developing my business, like all the other areas are sort of like thriving, and this piece, this very, very important part of anyone's business and career, in fact, and life, very, very neglected. And money's sort of coming in, money's going out, but there's zero sort of structure around that. And this is exactly what a fixed mindset will do, even to a coach. Okay. So your mind is a powerful thing. The stories you tell yourself and the things that you believe about yourself, they will either prevent change from happening, or it will, if you use it in the right way, it will allow you to kind of develop new skills and abilities, allowing abilities to blossom. Now, Carol Dweck, I think is the pronunciation, is a researcher at Stanford University, and she's well known for her work around fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And she describes the difference. I'll just copy and paste her explanation into the chat box. But she differentiates these two mindsets in the way she kind of saw in students. So in a fixed mindset, students believe their basic abilities, their intelligence, their talents are just fixed traits. You are born with certain traits, and you can't go beyond that. You can't develop beyond that. And they have a certain amount, and that's that. And then their goal becomes to just look smart all the time, and never ever look dumb. Okay, so that's it's something called impression management. And I know if you've ever been on one of my programs, you will sort of understand that concept of always being so fixated on managing the impression that you're making that you're actually wasting a lot of energy in that. In a growth mindset, students understand that their talents and abilities can be developed through effort, through repetition, through practice, and good teaching and persistence. They don't necessarily think everyone's the same, or that anyone can be Einstein. It's not like suddenly tomorrow it can be an astronaut, but they believe everyone can get smarter in certain areas if they work at it. Now, this might seem quite obvious, right? We know that we can learn things through practice and repetition. It's more the subtle belief systems that prevent us from actually acting on this. So let me first explain the benefits of a growth mindset. As I said, that it might seem obvious, right? We all know that learning, practicing something, we get better at it. But most of us are guilty of having a fixed mindset in certain situations, especially situations, even as a coach, where we perceive that we have less skill or ability or talent. Now, the reality is, I'm never going to be a mathematician, but if I had not caught this belief in time, and really I should have caught it far earlier as to what it was happening on an unconscious level, and that's what we do in coaching. We kind of dig underneath that limiting belief to understand what the pattern is underneath. If I'd never caught it and brought it into my conscious mind, it would have continued to cause inaction in this area. And those limiting beliefs and those stories I had were kind of were directing me in a way that was making me not act on something that is really, really important. So a lot of the story that I was creating around, okay, so let's imagine my story is I'm not good at maths. I've never been good at maths. There's an unconscious pattern that I've uncovered around, being told by a math teacher that I wasn't any good, or as a child not being able to do something. And there's a pattern that's logged into my brain to say, you're not good at maths. So anytime there's a situation where maths or percentages or anything like that is being shared, my mind automatically blocks that information because I've reinforced that pattern. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to listen to that because I'm not good at maths. So I'm not going to engage in this conversation. And this is all happening largely unconsciously unless we catch it. Now, this can be really, really dangerous because a fixed mindset can often prevent important skill development and growth without us even knowing, which is essentially sabotaging, it could be your health or your happiness or your progress in certain areas down the line. So can you imagine a business owner who doesn't acknowledge her finances in any way, shape or form? Okay. So for example, if I'm a person who says, okay, I'm not good at maths, then that belief acts as a very easy excuse for me to avoid practicing math. The fixed mindset prevents me from failing in the short run because it's like, oh, if you engage in this, you're going to fail. And remember I talked about the fixed mindset. You never ever want to fail. And in the long run, it hinders my ability to learn, grow, and develop this new skill that now is becoming far more relevant in my life, my career, my success. So for me, and I can't even believe how ridiculous this is, but for me, it prevented me from even engaging with an accountant for fear of not being able to kind of communicate in this way, or I think it was more shame that my finances are in such a terrible, in terms of structure, really terrible position. So that's how it can unconsciously stop you in so many ways. Like these things you might not even be aware of. So on the other hand, someone who constantly practices, this is not something you just have. You don't just have a fixed mindset or have a growth mindset. This is a practice. So you either continually reinforce and practice a fixed mindset, or you practice a growth mindset. And in different circumstances, you might kind of dip in both, and you've got to work at constantly practicing this growth mindset in different areas of your life. So if I had a growth mindset in this area, which I'm now working on, I'd be willing to try math problems, even if I failed. I would, potentially, and I have done many of these things already, but, download an app and continue to practice, not just maths, but it's not necessarily the maths, it's the business side of it. And understanding all of those terms and getting familiar with those. I might watch YouTube videos, I'll get a fucking accountant. And in a growth mindset, I would see failure and setbacks simply as an opportunity to learn, right? It's an area that I can continue to develop my skills in, rather than a signal that I am inadequate. Right. So rather than reinforcing a story that I'm inadequate, which fuels a totally different reaction, action, and result. Instead, it's this, I'm not good at something, I'm going to work it, I'm going to learn. So as a result, people who have a growth mindset are more likely to maximize their potential, right? They tend to learn from criticism and failure rather than ignoring it, to overcome challenges rather than sort of avoiding them. And they find inspiration in the success of others rather than feeling threatened by it. So Dweck's research raises an important question about the connection between what you believe, what you do, and the result that you ultimately get. So if you believe things about yourself, like it's hard for me to lose weight, I'm not good with numbers, I'm not very sporty, I'm not a natural athlete, I'm not creative, I'm a procrastinator, I'm not a confident person, right? It's pretty clear that those fixed mindsets, so those statements that you continue to reinforce, will cause you to avoid experiences where you might feel like a failure in that area. And as a result, you don't learn as much and it's harder to get better. Okay, so this is particularly relevant during change, especially in a workplace context, because we're constantly avoiding anyone seeing our weaknesses for fear that we won't be the one deemed suitable for the very limited resources of a promotion or a pay rise. So we spend lots and lots of times and lots of energy trying to hide our weaknesses, trying to hide what we're not good at, out of fear that we won't be one of the ones deemed deemed worthy enough for a space at the table. And this is especially prevalent in women, where there are perceived limited spaces at the table. It can fuel this kind of competitive mindset without us even knowing it. So in this kind of fixed mindset, the view, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is that my potential is predetermined, okay, and setbacks are failures. And that's the limit of my ability. Once I fail at something, that's it. It means I can't do it, and I've got to go elsewhere or do something else. And I don't push past that. I would stick to what I know. So in the context of my business, I was thriving in all these other areas, and I was just sort of ignoring this space, because in my unconscious mind, I was like, okay, I'm not good at that, so let's just ignore that piece of it. Now, a growth mindset in the context of change and in an employee will embrace disruption and change to improve the organization. Setbacks are instead, and failures are instead, seen as opportunities to learn and develop and push past that. So once you fail, you get up and you try again, you try a different avenue. Effort and attitude in their mind determine their success, not these predefined things that I was born with. And they will continually try new things. So what can we do about this? How can you change the things you believe about yourself, reduce the impact of these kind of fixed mindsets that might trickle in every now and then, and actually to achieve your goals? And as part of coaching, this is what we use, right? We use a variety of skills and techniques to engage your brain in a different way, and sort of tap into your different senses in different ways to essentially, what we're doing is rewiring old patterns on an unconscious level. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much, but if you're part of the Master Change membership, then I'm going to be delving into how unconscious patterns are created, and we're going to tap into some tools that I've used again very recently to master this piece that I've been challenged by. So we're gonna tap into that and how we can rewire some of those unconscious patterns to ensure that you're getting you've got patterns that are actually going to be serving you and your goals. But very basically, any form of repetition, there's multiple ways, but the key one is any form of repetition, right? And it might seem like a cliche, but repetition is truly the mother of all skills. Okay, so embrace her. There is great power in repetition due to the way our brains work, because of the awesomeness of neuroplasticity. Okay, which basically means our brains are not what they earlier, they thought in earlier theories that your brain sort of is, you know, grows to a certain level up until the end of childhood, and then that's it. It becomes fixed. Actually, our brains are constantly creating new neural pathways. And a lot of the research that I've been looking into around the neuroplasticity of our brain and how that works in terms of habit creation and identity, you know, one of the key things that neuroscientists recommend is that we continue to challenge ourselves, take small risks. It's like flexing your brain muscle, and the more you do it, the more capable you are moving into old age. And actually, they've done some brilliant research in the brains of the differences in the brains of older people and those people who have kind of lived a life, who are continually challenging themselves, creating new neural pathways, have far healthier brains for far longer, able to do things, and far more capable. So some really interesting research around that. But more so, I think what this tells us is the whole idea that I am who I am and that's it, I can't do anything about it. It's bullshit, right? Just this conversation, hopefully you are enjoying it enough, but just this conversation over the last kind of 20 minutes will be creating new neural pathways in your brain, meaning you are a different person to what you were 20 minutes ago. Okay, so the potential of this is just incredible, I think, in terms of understanding who we are and our personalities and our identities and our habits, and how we can crack some of the habits that are now not serving us. So repetition, it's not just useful for kind of mastering a skill, but also for mastering those habits that mean we don't need to rely solely on willpower, right? It becomes automatic. And through frequent, even tiny actions every day, we can feel a sense of progress that releases, if you've heard of me talk about this before, I'm just gonna, oh, Pooja's waiting in the, sorry, Pooja. Yeah, so you know, progress releases dopamine in the body, and again, that is a chemical reaction in our body that makes us want to do it again and again. It makes us feel physically better, and we want to do more of it. So a really, really effective way of kind of reinforcing habits. Okay, so I'd be really, really interested in hearing some of your thoughts if you've heard about this concept before, in terms of growth mindset, fixed mindset, neuroplasticity, or how you may or may not have sort of used this in your own lives. So I'll be interested to hear